The Lekki shooting has left bitter taste in the mouth of many in Nigeria and across the world. And while the figure of those who died has not been determined, some have described it as a massacre. Joining us to discuss this is a former governorship candidate in Ogun State, Ademola Ogunbanjo. Good to have you join us, Mr. Ogunbanjo.
Thank you for having me.
Well, good afternoon to you. We understand your house is close to the epicenter of the hashtag EndSARS movement. Tell us what you observed.
Well, from the beginning of the protests, I actually did not think that it would gather as much support as it did eventually. And it came to my notice, as it did every resident of Lekki, VI, Ikoyi, Oniru area, and even further out, when we started to struggle with traffic. So a number of us decided to stay back at home and work from home. We could hear the sound. I could, from my, place, hear the sound of the people at the toll. And in the same vein, I could hear the gunshots on Tuesday when it started. One of my younger cousins had gone to the toll to protest as well. And he said sometime in the very early evening, late afternoon, he noticed that some people were taking out cameras. He wasn't sure what kind of cameras. The governor had said they weren't CCTV, but, cameras for capturing traffic data. But he noticed that they were taking that out, and he just felt like, okay, maybe something was about to go down. So he left and came back home, and then not long after that, we heard the gunshots. I wasn't there to, ascertain exactly what was going on, whether they were shooting, in the air or they were shooting, right at people. We've heard conflicting reports of what actually happened. But, I was well kept abreast, with the sound. It was sound of music, sound of people singing national anthem, sound of people cracking jokes and making demands and chanting EndSARS, and then it was sadly gunshot sounds.
And with the gunshots, how long did the gunshots go out for?
Considering the fact that I did not particularly measure this, so I would only throw out a guess, must have gone on for sporadically for about 8 minutes, and then intermittently you would hear it, and that went on for about an hour.
Very good, Mr. Ogunbanjo. Now, it was rather strategic to set up camp by the protesters at the Lekki toll area due to the sensitive nature of the business concerns in that place. So how would you gauge the impact in that perspective? You also mentioned the fact that you had to work from home as well. So what are your thoughts there?
Well, whoever chose that location, thought about it very carefully. If they needed to get our attention, they sure did. We couldn't go about our normal daily business. Usually, when young people take to the streets expressing their grievances about, one thing or the other, some of us, don't even pay attention to what it is that they're talking about. But having chosen that particular location with businesses being hampered and, normal flow of traffic being disturbed, we all had to take note. We all had to pause, hear what it was that they were saying. And some of us gave support, because we saw the veracity, of the demands that they were making. They weren't, asking for anything extraordinary. They were simply asking that, an institution that has been set up to protect the people, not just them, not just the young, but all of us, an institution that has been set up to protect us, do exactly that and not terrorize us. So because of that location, we all took note. The government noticed and the people noticed as well.
And on social media, the ill-fated night was described as a massacre. I am using you as a sort of a more or less eyewitness account now. Is that what you would describe it as? Was it a massacre?
Well, I am more of an ear witness, person than eyewitness, So I heard gunshots. I didn't see dead bodies. All right. So I'm unable to target a massacre.
Okay.
But whatever it was, was it necessary that the military was rolled out? I am sure there are people who can justify that in government who pulled that trigger. I do not think it was necessary. I believe, I always have, believed in deliberation and collaboration and engagement, as a path to solving any issue. Using force on armed protesters, people who were exercising their constitutional right, and then sending the military out to go shoot at them is absolutely condemnable. But this is history repeating itself, right? When I was a much younger guy, back in university days, we protested against the military. We protested against the annulment of the June 12, 1993 elections. And yes, the military will roll out the tanks, and they will shoot some of us and all of that. And then you ask yourself, why is it happening today in a democracy? It is simply because the guys who fought back then are still the guys that are in power today. They may have changed their uniforms to local attires through, and haven't gotten into office through a democratic process. But it doesn't mean that the essence of their understanding of governance has changed.
Very good. Now, to a large extent, do you think we will need to witness more protest before a government actually takes notice on, us doing what the public or the youth actually want them to do in getting their attention, you think?
Unfortunately, it had to come to a protest for government to even listen at all. And what's even more fortunate is the fact that even when government then said they had listened, they had heard, and they would begin to implement the requisite change, in order to answer to the clamor of the people, trust had been eroded, and we didn't believe them. And that was why, those young men and women, decided to continue out there until the needle began to move in the direction of reform as they had demanded. So are we going to see more protests for as long as we have a breakdown in law and order, in justice, the execution of justice or enforcement of it, and then also as we experience poor governance, bad policies, and see, incompetent leadership in public offices, yes, there will be more protests. This is what we're seeing is an awakening of our social consciousness. All right, people have been taking it for so long, and now they're saying, look, we deserve better, and we're going to demand better. And until better comes, there will be more protest.
Well, social consciousness indeed. Because the Lagos state government had imposed a 24-hour curfew, what's your sense of the protesters violating it or not adhering to that curfew order?
Well, there are mixed sentiments with regards to that. Somebody would say, but there was a curfew that had been announced, everybody should have cleared out. Mm-hmm. All right. But, in my own opinion, when people are on the streets expressing grievances to government peacefully, your response cannot be a curfew. All right. It then simply means you're saying, we're tired of you now. We've given you 2 weeks to protest. You've tested our patience. It's time for you to go back home. And if you don't go home, then we're going to shoot at you, because that's exactly what happened. Mm. All right. So I do not believe that was the right thing to do. And all states calling, for 24-hour curfews, it was like they all read from the same script.
Indeed, Mr. Ogunbanjo. Now, I would like your thoughts on the international response to the shootings, the rampage, and I would like your thoughts on that. Yes, there were a few condemnations by some notable people abroad. But what do you make of the outcome?
Well, so let's be clear, all right? In as much as the awakening, like I said earlier, is a global thing now, because you look at Black Lives Matter, you look at you flash back a few years ago, and then you look at the Arab Spring, and then now NSAS and all of that. It's global, but the challenge we have is local, all right? So yes, we will naturally expect international support, international influence on our governments, and all of that. But all these international organizations and indeed, nations are distracted. Take the United States, for example. There's a pivotal, election coming up in less than 2 weeks. Okay, and then there's a spike in COVID cases, in the US as well. So they are distracted. They have their own issues to deal with. Go to Europe, it's the same thing. There's Brexit to deal with that's not been sorted. There's also a spike in COVID cases, and there's a recession to deal with, and China couldn't care less, to be honest. Okay, so yes, certain people made certain comments, but that's about it. That's the extent that it's going to go. Everybody has some local issue to deal with that's really pivotal to the continuity of their well-being, at this time. So let's look inwards, right? Let's solve these problems, coming together as a people, old and young, and move our nation forward. Perhaps it's time for us to start looking at one another within our committee, rather than, expecting that the international community will do anything significant.
And what would you say are the losses we've incurred from these protests and gains, if any?
Let me first speak to losses.
Yeah.
The economic impact is, clear to all. We have also seen how a different category of the youth and even the old, from some of the videos that I've seen, have taken advantage of the situation to loot the businesses of other citizens that are toiling every day to make ends meet. So the ramifications of the losses is not only government-based, or the fact that certain corporate entities, had their businesses disturbed, but also SMEs were affected badly, and the economic impact is, something that we need to calculate over time and see how it is we can recover from this. Not to speak to the damage on, infrastructure that is still going to be, fixed with taxpayers' money. So at the end of the day, it's like what we say in Yoruba land.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's that. But gains, if any, yes.
Very good, Mr. Ogunbanjo. Now, let's talk about the authorities. They were clearly...
he was going to tell us if there were any gains.
Please go ahead.
Yes. I was going to tell you that there are gains. And the gains are simple. We have seen that in as much as we like to say, no matter how much we express our grievances, government will not listen. We have seen that government will listen, because they did. How they handled the situation is what we're faulting, but the bottom line is we can get their attention. We have also seen now that when the subject of the movement is one that is compelling to all, there is a way to mobilize very quickly. And we have also seen that the young can organize themselves effectively, and the community, the larger community, will support what it is that they're doing for as long as they do it peacefully. That we have seen. And what we have to do now is to ensure that future protests are even better than the last one. All right? And then because we must continually engage government. Nigeria belongs to all of us, those that are in government and those of us that are not. We must continually engage. We must continue to collaborate and, ensure that we move this nation forward for the betterment of ourselves and our future.
Well, that's where we're going to have to leave it now. Ademola Ogunbanjo, a former Ogun State gubernatorial candidate, many thanks for your insights. As I have said, eyewitness account. Thank you.